everybody, and welcome to another episode of Storytellers. I am Carrie Rose O'Connell, back with you again, and today I have the wonderful pleasure of sharing time with Lindsay Heatley, who is a director here in New Mexico, and she's going to be talking about one of her newest short film projects, My Walk Home, as well as some additional work she's done and her perspectives as a female director in the industry, especially here in New Mexico. So Lindsay, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've had already a really nice package of work that you were able to share with me. And in our episode notes, we'll have all of Lindsay's website and links that are relative to her work, so you guys can all check them out. But I wanted to share that you've not only had My Walk Home, which we'll talk about in a minute, but you've had some other great short films that have had some nice recognition. El Norte, Dreamers, Kings and Queens. And it sounds like, or what I read, if I'm not mistaken, that you had a lot of your work, these all went through, let's see, El Norte was at the Girl House Cinema in Germany, is that correct?
Yeah, in
Fantastic.
Berlin, yeah.
That's great. And then Dreamers was with the Nasty Women United Festival, is that
New
correct?
York.
That's
great
so
festival,
great.
Yeah, New York, yeah.
And then Kings and Queens was in the LGBTQ Short Films Festival, is that correct? That's
yeah,
so
here in
great.
Cali, yeah.
What was it like to have your projects all achieve different levels of recognition as you put them out there?
You know, it's when you're making the films and you're first starting out, that's the goal, right? Is you're like, I want to do my screening, I want to get to the festival. And it was definitely a journey to get them in there. It's a progression. Like I've had many, like for everyone that was like, yeah, we want you to screen. I had at least 20 that were like, no, thank you, but no. So I just want to preface it with, just a festival isn't the end all to be all, you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's a huge validation and it feels amazing, but I would say never let that be like your main goal, because that can be a little discouraging to go down that route. Definitely the main goal is you want to make your film because you want to share something, and the festivals kind of come along with it. You know, they validate your main purpose, but the main purpose always has to be you want to make this film to make this film.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We've had members in the past that talked about the festival circuit really remind people that almost that festivals aren't even really about that film anymore. It's about your networking ability and your and just kind of that street cred that you get in the industry from going through that process. Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I love it. Like it's a huge moment. It's, it feels great when it happens, but it's definitely, it reminds you what's important too. It feels good to get that validation, but you're like, you got to make the film because you want to make the film.
Sure, absolutely. So tell us, I'm curious, before we get into your current project, My Walk Home, that we're going to spend time talking about today, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what kind of led you on the path to being a director?
Yeah, we kind of spoke about it a little bit, but I got in a strange way too. I didn't set out to be a director. I was a composer when I first kind of got into all this. I was a musician. Wanted to be a musician, found film, and started composing soundtracks for my friends who did short films. And I started visiting them on their sets, and I started creeping in like, well, what if this happened? What if this story happened? And I kind of fell into the role of writing my own stuff because I just wanted to tell a story beyond the music. So I went from composer to write my first short film. It was an utter disaster. I shot it for like, I think $400 that I had saved up for a year. Had no idea what I was doing. There was 3 of us, and I'm so glad I did it, but I haven't watched it in 4 years because it was so bad, but that gave me the bug for sure.
Wow. And, very much by happenstance then.
Yes. I got into the industry that way by kind of starting to make my own shorts, but I eventually progressed into being a PA on union projects, and that's where I found New Mexico and everything. So the industry's great out here, and kind of the past 4 years worked my way up on sets just learning. And so if you want to be a director, you're starting to think about it, I highly recommend checking out, a production assistant job on sets here in New Mexico, because you will learn more like on one show than you would in 3 years of school, probably.
I've heard that feedback quite a few times from other members and people that I've spoken to in the industry that, especially if you're not coming in with a formal education or contacts or connections, that production assistant can be one of the best, easiest jobs to obtain
Yep.
and get
And
right
if you're willing
into.
to work and you're willing to learn, you're going to succeed. I knew nothing my first day on set, and everybody was so nice and just, all right, here's a walkie-talkie. This is how you use it. And I just, what's going on here? But, you know,
Yeah.
if you're willing to show up, if you'll show up for those 4 a.m. call times and you'll work hard all day, you'll learn and people will teach you.
Yeah.
It's a good way to do it. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So
Yeah.
I noticed that I looked at your body of work on your website and I watched the videos that you had up. And I just wanted to say that part of my reflection is that your work has a very raw expression of the modern human experience in a lot of ways.
That's
So
kind of you to say.
oh yeah, absolutely. It was for me. It was definitely an emotional experience, and so that's why we're not going to actually share any of Lindsay's clips today because I'm wanting everybody to go to her website and really watch them from start to end because they are that impactful in the way that you story tell. And so I'm curious, how did you decide the stories, you know, especially these ones that really made more of a mark? What was it for you that inspired the story? How did you just come upon these particular scripts?
I think film for me, even though I didn't study it, it was always part of my life. I think for all of us growing up in the time we are, but I saw myself in TV shows and in films. Like I didn't see myself in the world, but I saw myself on a screen. And for
Mm,
me, that's how I connected and I found peers was through films and through TV shows. And so film for me has always been that gateway, like where you can see stuff and you can connect to stuff that's not, maybe it's not in your day-to-day life. Like I did one film, Kings and Queens, about the drag scene in New York. And for any like queer young kids who are out there and it's not there, here, look, here's a world you can be a part of. So that was that one of my
yeah.
stories, you know, for that. And then El Norte, the immigration crisis, my mom's Mexican. And so I hear a lot of personal things about it, but I know a lot of my friends who are, that maybe don't have that personal experience, a lot of the times they just don't know. And they just
Right.
don't have that human connection that makes an important story like real to you. And so
Yeah.
for me, film is the human connection. It lets you put yourself in another person's shoes, and it's not, this is what you have to think, this is what you have to believe. It's just experience, you know, just experience a day in another person's life. And so that's kind of,
Ah,
it's all stories that I had a connection to that I wanted to share, but I didn't want to shove it down anybody's throat. I didn't want to be like, this is what you have to believe, this is what you want to think. Just live a day in this life and then make your decision. So that's
yeah.
kind of how I got there, for most of them at least.
That's great. It really, the work like yours, what I appreciate about it is it really helps people kind of inherently just by watching and absorbing the story. It almost helps you inherently build compassion and empathy
Oh,
because
I'm
you
so glad you
could
said that.
really
Yeah.
feel how the characters on screen, what they're going through. For
Mhm.
me, I'm a big fan of very old classic movies. When most people are watching blockbusters, I'm watching something from like 1937 on Turner
Yeah.
Classic Movies.
Yeah.
And it harkened back to that for me a
Oh, wow.
lot as a viewer because I always felt the reason I respected older classics more than a lot of modern releases is they didn't have as much special effects,
Hmm.
flash and bang, CGI. They didn't have all that. So they had to
Yeah.
really rely on the characters delivering that story
Yeah.
and then the implied surroundings and the implied events in a lot of
Hmm.
ways. And that's what I really appreciated about your work is I felt that very same kind of emotional connection where I felt like I was there more with the characters than I was just watching something on a
Oh,
screen.
thank you.
So yeah,
That's very kind of you
absolutely.
to say.
Absolutely. If you guys can't tell, I'm a very big fan of Lindsay. So
Thank you.
please, you guys have to watch her work. It
Oh,
is
thanks.
really, really incredible. So tell us a little bit about your newest film, My Walk Home,
Sure.
and what inspired it, why now, and what it was like filming it and putting it together.
Well, it's very much a woman's experience, this film, not excluding anybody who wants to watch it, but it was written like that, but it was actually inspired by a conversation I had at work with a bunch of men. And all of my
Ah,
friends, but the conversation nowadays turns to the point where they say, well, it's easier to be a woman than a man today. If you're a white man, you're done. Like our time's over. And these are all guys I know, they're my friends, and I was just like, what are you talking about? And so it became this whole, we were on set, and it was, some dudes, and we were talking. I was the only girl, and so we were talking, and I said, well, I don't think that's true, because you try to list facts, you try to say things, and they're like, no, because it's harder for me to get a job. If you're a woman, you automatically have it, da da da. And so it came down to the bones where I said, well, you can walk home alone at night, can't you? And they're like, yeah, so. And I was like, I can't. You never. And they said, well, what do you mean you can't walk home alone? I was like, well, if I walk home alone at night in the dark, I'm scared. This is like, my life is in danger. If you walk home alone at night, you're walking home alone at night. So that, and they kind of, they got it a little bit. And they're like, well, what do you know me? So I told the keys in my hand. Like, I always have pepper spray. And I used to work at a yoga studio, and I would walk home alone at night every night. And I would have my keys and I would have my pepper spray. And I said, that was every night was fearful for me. And every night for you, you know, if you were in my shoes, you know, you're a man walking home, it's not. And I said, it's just one small instance, but it's something that people can relate to. And you try to explain, like, how do you explain to somebody who will never have your experience, you know?
Yeah.
And so that was just a small instance where I could verbalize it. And then I felt like something I could share with a film. Like, how do I can say this to you as much as I want, but maybe I can show you, and maybe you can be me for a second. So that inspired it. And I had a bunch of really great friends who, as soon as I was like, this is the idea, they jumped on board, and we were writing and shooting before you knew it. And
that's so great. And so how long did it take you to get from the writing phase to where you were filming and getting it into post-production and editing?
I started writing, I think, about the fall of 2019, and I was on a show at the time, on the day break for a Netflix show that was like a 6-month thing, so it didn't go as fast as it could have, because I was kind of writing on the weekends. But
sure,
I wrote starting in the fall. I finally got a draft I really liked in the spring, and we were shooting in July. It was a little slower than I would have liked, but that was just because I was working, and you have to pay the bills first.
Gotta do what you gotta do. Yeah,
exactly. And I have such a great crew around me that has done the crew I worked with in New Mexico here that I filmed another El Norte with. We get each other, so the turnaround's pretty quick for us. We can start shooting in a month or so and have it all laid out.
That's great that you mentioned that. I was going to ask you, what is it like for you to resource the support you need when you decide you need to put a project into production? And I was going to say, do you use people that you've gone to before and keep connections with?
Yeah, I do mostly. Like, my DP is this amazing guy, Neil Solberg. Look him up. He's fantastic. He's a gaffer. He works as a gaffer now on union shows, but he can do things with light that are amazing. And we met on a set on a show called Midnight Texas and just started talking, and every time I come up to him with crazy ideas and I'm like, I want to do this, he's like, great, follow in your lead, let's do it. So he's fantastic. And so he's kind of my starting point. And I usually, like, together we'll build people around, but it's him. Kingsley Buelltel is a camera AC in the union, but she comes and she shoots. She's an operator, and she and Neil kind of split DP duties on my shows. Those are my kind of like core group, and we build out from there, just whoever's available. Yeah.
How do you go about working with the actors? What do you do to find them, to bring them in on the project?
It's another thing where on sets, New Mexico, I'll say, is a great, like, I've worked in New York for a little bit. I went to school there, so that's kind of where I started. And no shade to New York, but New Mexico, if you go to somebody and say, hey, I got this project, they're like, great, what time? Where do you want me? I would very much encourage people, just reach out to, and send Facebook messages, instant message me. New Mexicans they're stoked to make art, so it's cool.
We're good neighbors.
Set, for sure. No, it really are. Like, again, I love New York, but there's a world of difference between filming something in New York. It's, you have to pay me, you can't do that, but you should pay people, but it's kind of, they'll take advantage of you. But in New Mexico, like the 66 diner I shot at, I went up and I said, well, I have this idea. I talked to him, and he said, great, all sounds good. And I said, okay, well, what will the rate be? He's like, are you kidding me? That sounds like a great film. You shoot here for free.
Yeah, that's great.
But I missed your question in terms of actors. My lead, Sophia Embed is her name. She's fantastic. Like,
It's great.
Her on a camera, when you can put a camera right in her face and it doesn't bother her one bit, and she'll show you every emotion you can give her. But I met her on set. She was standing in on a Midnight Texas, again, that show, and we just started talking, and I told her I want to make my own films, and she said, just give me a call. And that's and I've used her. I think we've only done 2 together so far, but I'm going to use her for everything I ever do. She's fantastic.
She was great. I loved her in my walk home. I really, really did. She delivered. I was just like right there with her and everything.
It's a thing. It's kind of scary. I knew this film for me was a real challenge on camera work. I really wanted to use camera to tell a story. Like, we know that inherently, but that's really a skill that you have to hammer out and develop. Well, for me, at least I had to really learn how to use the camera and not rely on dialogue as much as I had in the past. But I said it's going to be a lot of close-ups. There's going to be a lot of uncomfortable things, and there's going to be, you're going to have a camera in your face. We're going to be right there, and didn't phase her one bit. She gave me everything and more.
My Walk Home isn't really that dialogue heavy.
Not at all.
The story that you get told throughout the entire vision of it is definitely clear and impactful. I mean, it delivers. And so I was wondering for you what that has been like, really, as a director, holding that space so it's not all given over to your DP, and you're really holding the insight of what you want that frame to look like.
Right.
So what was that like for you? Did you have to go through, in this kind of a film, did you have to go through a lot of takes? Did you feel like you guys got it very organically? How did that work?
A first note, if anybody's out there with your DP, if you're ever fighting with the DP on the shot to the point where it's good for them to give you an opposite voice, but your DP, you should never have to fight your DP. Like, they'll give suggestions and they'll stick up, but if you have that, maybe it's time to move on, not in a mean way to anybody, but with Neil, it's short. I can look at him and I said, this is what I want. And he either gives me a suggestion to enhance it or, we get it.
Yeah.
So that's just a side note that I had to learn the hard way too, where, you shouldn't be fighting your DP. But in terms of my framing and all that was something I'm learning. Definitely, it's not my strength. It's something I'm trying to work towards. And so it was a challenge. I think the nature of the story lends itself to silence for sure.
Yeah.
But it was a specific challenge to myself to not rely on dialogue, just because I've seen a lot of the shorts I've seen are so much more impactful because you're watching instead of being told all the information, and it really forces you to look at what's happening. And I had a really good mentor of mine, Dawn Jones. She is a still photographer and worked as an AC in the industry as well. And she and her husband would always say, it's the geometry of a scene. Like, they would watch my shorts and give me really good notes, and they're like, and it's a trope now, but every frame of painting, great YouTube channel, but treat your frames like paintings. Treat them like the objects in your frame it's not the actor's face, it's what's happening next to them too. Like, if you use all that, that's where you're going to get a rich story, because it can't just be the actor, it has to be your frame too. That's the privilege we get as movie makers. We can show them as well as tell them.
Yeah. I think that you're really successful with that, because it was real easy just to live very much in that moment as I went through the story. It was really impressive. So tell me now, what are your hopes for this film, right? Obviously, considering the difficult impacts COVID-19 has made in the industry. You have it done, you have it released. Is that it for this film? Do you hope for more for this particular one? Where are you at with My Walk Home?
Yeah, in terms of festivals, we have tons we're still waiting to hear back from. So we're waiting for that too. Yeah. We'll see what happens. We're really happy with what we've gotten into so far, met great people. It is different with COVID. We had one festival in New York that we were really planning on attending just to meet people, because again, especially smaller, like Revolution meets, you get a lot of great networking and you meet great people. So it's a bit of a letdown to not have that available to you, so there definitely has been an impact from COVID. In terms of this specific film, I'm working on my first feature writing right now, writing and rewriting and writing and rewriting.
That's so great.
Yeah, and it has similar themes to this one, and I'm definitely going to use this as proof of concept, I think, to help me as I'm writing my feature and pitching it to people. So I'm really happy with how the film turned out, and I'm happy to use it also to kind of further what I'm doing next, using it as proof of concept for what I have coming up.
So the feature you're working on, this will be your first feature.
Yes, yeah.
That is very cool. We can't wait to see it. So
thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I'm really excited about it. Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, the industry and all the impacts, that's going to hold up your timeline on working on a feature. But there's still a lot of great things you guys can do in development phases. So
I never in a million years would have had this much time to write. And I'm not, COVID definitely has up and downs, but I remind myself that every day, that this is a chance you're probably never going to get again. So use it.
Yeah,
You know?
put that
Yeah,
work towards it.
exactly.
That's fantastic. So in terms of kind of having project support,
Mhm.
just for not only My Walk Home, but for your work in general, what are you most looking for to continue to connect with out here in the film industry in New Mexico?
Yeah, it's writers right now, just because of where I'm at.
Mm,
I have a few friends who are kind of the same stage as me in their careers and everything, and we're talking at least every other day, because we're all writing, and
mm,
I will call my friend Jess Cost and be like, I just need to say an idea to you, just let me talk at you for 10 minutes, and she's
yeah.
like, great, and we do it back and forth. So right now, specifically, writers, reach out,
Mm,
let's talk, let's share our stuff. It just helps to have another eye on it. But
yeah.
really, I mean, I would encourage anybody, if you just want to talk, or you have a question, or you're a female grip and you want to grip on a feature if it's coming up, reach out to me, because I love collaborating. I love talking with people and getting new ideas, and just seeing it keeps you going, it keeps
Yeah.
you creative. So
Are there
anything
any
really.
um, other than director, are there anything, as I know, obviously writer, other than those kind of two hats that you're filling, is there anything
Mhm.
else you've always really thought, one day I'm going to do this on a particular project, and
Yeah,
take
I
yourself
work.
into any other directions?
Sure. The dream is always, it's a, I'll talk it out a little bit, but
Yeah.
I work in the camera department now. I'm part of the 600. That's a recent transition. I was a PA, then a grip, and then now I work in camera. But lighting, it gives you, when you're gripping or doing electric and camera, it gives you such an appreciation for the camera and lighting that
Mm.
you think you have until you're the one shaping the shadows, or you're the one, then it gives you,
Right.
so if I got enough knowledge and enough work to ever DP one of my own films, I think it'd be an interesting project. I don't think I'd ever
Yeah.
set out to be a director DP solely, because I love the creative collaborative element so much.
Sure.
But it would be a challenge, years down the line. I think it'd be cool.
Absolutely. Do you
Yeah.
think you'll ever compose for a film again, or compose one of your own films, do you think?
I might, it's funny. I compose. I knew I should be a filmmaker, because I composed so much, and it started to feel like a job, which it was my job, but I didn't love it. But filmmaking, I can grind and grind and grind, and I still love it at the end of the day. Like
Yeah.
music is kind of a hobby for me, not work. I have composed for my first couple films, and I would do it again for sure, but it does take away from, for me, I'm not at the stage where I have enough like creative energy to spare. By the time
Yeah.
I'm done directing and editing, it's really nice to have that fresh eye composer who is just coming in. It's like, hey, let's talk, and gets your engines going again. You can
Yeah.
get a little burnt out by the end of it, especially in the indie world, because you're doing a lot of this stuff yourself. So
For
right now, I
sure.
like having a fresh composer come in, because they get me all excited about it. They have great fresh ideas. But
Yeah.
I would definitely do it if it felt right, for sure. Yeah.
Fantastic. I do want to share really quickly. I'm not going to share the video because I insist everybody has to watch it from beginning to end, but I am going to share really quickly. And I just want you to talk a little bit about filming on screen. Again, this is the great video that I'm not going to play for anybody because I insist everybody has to watch it on their
Oh,
own.
thank you.
But I would really love, let me move this little guy. I would love to talk about, so you did this on location in Albuquerque. The Route 66 diner, who you mentioned just briefly,
So
was
kind. Yeah.
really kind and let you film there on location.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a lot of great images on your website of your team all working. What was your day of days? Like, how many days were you actually working on this
Yeah,
for?
2 days. We did.
Just
We were
2.
all working. Most of my crew and myself were working on a show called Briar Patch at the time.
Uh-huh.
And so we were all on that. And so during the day we kind of sneak away and shot lists and plan stuff. Neil and I would, and we used our Saturday nights. And so we did overnights.
Oh,
We would
nice.
start we would get there 6, sun go down around 7:38, and we'd shoot till 1 or 2.
That's
And
fantastic.
yeah, but 2 days. And I recommend, if you're just shot list. Always give yourself a little more time than you think you need, but plan your shots. Plan it all out. It'll save you a world of hurt at the end if you don't.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Absolutely.
that's my opinion.
What I
Yeah.
loved about these pictures, though, is how Indian guerrilla, in some ways, your production looked, especially for the quality that it turns out with. So what is it like? And I'm going to stop sharing here really quickly so we
Sure.
can just pop back. But tell me, what's it like working on very shoestring budgets for short film projects like this? And how do you think that's going to be different than when you actually have to prepare and fundraise for your first feature?
It's I love it because it challenges me. And having worked, I can't recommend enough working as a crew member, because when you work on a crew member,
Mm.
you learn how to cut the fat in a really good way. Like, never
Ah,
compromise creative vision, but you learn to be prepared, because you'll have a day where a director is not prepared and they show up and they're swaggering around and you're like, just make a shot, and it teaches you to always prepare. It's just little things like that. Um,
yeah.
yeah, having less money, I think, is a blessing, because it forces you to make the film, and it forces
Yeah.
you to get your shots. And so I kind of like it, and it makes it. I've produced my own just out of necessity as well, and I really
Mhm.
enjoy that aspect. But you really have to think about what shots you need. You really have to think about planning them correctly, and it makes you creative in a whole other way, that if you just
Yeah.
have everything handed to you, whenever you picture your film in your mind, it's never going to turn out to be that. And it's always a great thing that it is, because I
Yeah.
have one shot in the film that's so wide, and you have two cars pass, and the camera was there, and that's one of my favorite shots. And it just happened. Like, we were planning on shooting that, but two cars passed at right the moment as we had a 2-car cross, and then she walked out right at the perfect timing. And it just happened because we were recording, and it was great. And it was one take, and I
Yeah.
had it, and I moved on. And so
Beautiful.
yeah, I mean, the world will give you stuff on the day. I think you get your best shots
Mhm.
when you're there on the day and you're set up and you're ready for it. But you don't need the big money. You don't need all that, as long as you're prepared, and as long it'll force you to get to the core of your story. Really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So for you, we talked a little bit before we got started that you've been talking to other filmmakers about how
Mhm.
do you guys really produce and release films now? Is it YouTube? Is it
Yeah.
working on streaming services? For
Yeah.
you, looking at where we're at as a film industry and the kind of forced changes everybody's kind of being pushed into making when
Mhm.
they think about how they work. For you, does that give you more freedom to say, I really am going to keep this independent and not, you know, really pull other larger production companies in to help me get it
Yeah.
made? Or what have you thought about how this is going to force you to look at like fuller length, even short film
Yeah.
projects?
And it's something, if anybody wants to chat about it, please reach out, because I'm really curious about this. My friend and I mentioned to you, we're talking about YouTube. Just, okay, say we can make our film, because we've made things on
Hmm.
nothing. Maybe we can make our feature on nothing. Maybe YouTube's where we distribute it. We don't have to compromise. We can just make it ourselves and get it out there. And that's how we generate an audience. And
Right.
the cool thing about Netflix and the streaming platforms, it's a good and a bad thing, because you have so much content that you can get
Hmm.
lost. That's the bad thing. But Netflix is willing to take the risks that other companies won't, because they get their money off subscribers, not off the movie itself making money back. So
Right.
they'll take risks that people just won't. The big companies, and I get it, they have a checklist, and you hit the checklist, they're going to make their 100 million back. It's great. But there's
Right.
no creativity. Netflix, yeah, we'll take a risk because we just need content. So we don't care if you check the boxes. So
Right.
myself and filmmakers, I think, are at my level. We're definitely attracted to companies like Netflix and A24, because they have that kind of vision where they're like, we care more about
Yeah.
the creativity than the, writing off the movie. But if we can't get to the big boys, yeah, we have YouTube, we have different
Yeah.
platforms, and we're definitely interested in seeing if that's an avenue. And it's a big discussion that I'm down to have with anybody who wants to have it, because I think
Yeah.
it's a perfect time for there to be new ways to distribute, and it's a perfect time
Sure.
for there to be new ways to share work. So
There's
yeah.
always room for film.
Mhm.
It's that delivery mechanism that sometimes we're forced to change. But
Yes. Yes.
when I started getting into film myself, it was a peculiar industry to me. And so
Mhm.
as a person that likes to look at the history of things to understand the present, I did a lot of looking into kind of the past. And through a lot of really difficult times, humanity has always been like, let's go to the movies.
Yeah, I mean,
World
that's where you
wars, it just
escape.
hasn't
Yeah.
mattered. There have always been that desire for the public to see
Yes. Yes.
new films.
Mhm.
And so I think that honestly, the independent filmmaker is going to be more nimble to respond to
100%.
changing environment than the studios that are a bit
Yeah,
more locked into traditional,
definitely.
Like you
And
said,
you
they have
know,
their check boxes, and
they
when you live
do.
that way, it's hard to adapt,
Yeah, and I get it.
you
I mean,
know?
that's how they're set up for, you know, they need to
Yeah,
make their money back. But it's just, and it's an exciting time because I'm
yeah.
A24. I'm a big fan. Everybody is. But movies like Midsummer that just came out, great film. But that never would have, you know, it never would have been made. I think, but it's a fantastic film and it has widespread appeal. And people were willing. They made, I think, I don't know their budget, but I know A24 likes to do 5 million around is their kind of what they do. And
Right.
they spend less money, but it gives you more of a chance. You know, they'll take
Yeah.
risks just because. Yeah, it's. I think we're at a really interesting time. I think the indie filmmakers definitely, not that we're going to be the summer blockbuster makers, but they're seeing that people want to see indie films because they want to see those
Yeah.
stories. Yeah.
Yeah, as we've all been driven into our homes and forced to binge watch
Mm-hmm.
TV and movies, we've really started clarifying what we like and don't like. And I think
Yeah.
that there has been a definite pull towards more original content that feels more like it's relevant to modern
Yeah.
times, you
There's just
know?
more options. You
Yeah,
know, you can
yeah,
watch any like you if you, whoever, not everybody, but there's so much more representation. You can find a show for you. And yeah, maybe you make a TV show and you don't make hundreds of millions of dollars and it's not, you know, not everybody watched it, but you'll have your audience who loves it, you know, and I think that's
yeah.
kind of where it's going is more niche, but people who are really into your work, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Anything else that you would like to share about your work or your vision or your next projects, support you want, connections you'd love to have, anything
Yeah.
like that?
Well, I'm just stoked to be here, honestly. It's really cool to get a chance to meet some new people who want to do film, but I am working on a feature now. I'm very much in the writing stage. So if anybody wants to collaborate, just wants to swap scripts, talk about stuff, I'm shooting this in Albuquerque when I get to make it. It's definitely going to be a New Mexico
Nice.
production. So as I get closer to that point, I'll be reaching out more. But yeah, if anybody, I mean, again, please
Fantastic.
reach out for anything if you just want to chat, you know, whoever you are,
Yes.
whatever you want to talk about, I'm down to talk about anything. So, yeah.
That's great. And we'll be encouraging our members to do that more and more with each other,
Yeah.
especially since right now we're all kind of pinned in and working on those projects that maybe
Mm-hmm.
spent some time on the back
Yeah.
burner
Yeah.
that we thought maybe we could work on. And now all of a sudden that's all we have to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Blessing and a curse. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That has definitely been, I think, that you could pretty much just say that for 2020.
Yeah.
We're just going to call
Exactly.
this
Yeah.
whole year
Yeah.
blessing and a
Yeah.
curse, you know.
Yeah.
It's been
Yeah.
hard, but there's been you know, I think if you can look for and seek out and walk, I like to say that I kind of walk that silver lining path, right?
Definitely. Yeah.
And you can figure out a way through a lot
Mm-hmm.
of things that are inspirational to you and help kind of keep you motivated and creative.
Yeah. No.
Or
And this is a great way to do it too. Just talking to each other. So I'm
yes,
excited. Yeah.
absolutely. So we will have in our YouTube episode notes all of Lindsay's links and details so you can get in touch with her as well as watch her work. Everybody has to watch My Walk Home. It's a tremendous film. And your other short films are available to play on your website that we'll link as well. So definitely take time to look at her work. You're definitely going to prove to be a force of filmmaking in New Mexico, I believe,
thank
Lindsay.
you.
You have a
Thank you
great
so much.
perspective. You figure out really meaningful stories to tell, and the way that you decide to share them and express them are really, really impactful. And what I loved about them is the simplicity of them, you know, and I think that really helps you get really involved with the actual story. So great job.
Thank you so much.
We'll have all of our links in the episode. Make sure you contact Lindsay and
Please
tell
do.
her that you want to partner with her on projects or talk to her about your projects. And again, please watch My Walk Home. Hopefully we'll be seeing some laurels and things like that as the festival circuits start kicking back on, because it definitely deserves to have some outreach and recognition. There's
Thanks.
not only a lot of women that'll appreciate watching this story, but I think there's a bunch of other men out there that will finally understand sometimes what women are talking about when we talk about the differences of walking around the planet as a woman versus a man. So there is a difference there. And
There is.
Lindsay captures it perfectly.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So thank you so much again for spending time with me today, Lindsay. This has been a third episode of Storytellers. We'll have another episode filming and coming soon. So make sure you subscribe here on our YouTube channel and hit the little bell so that you get notifications when our episodes go live. And then, of course, you can also follow us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, any of your favorite social media pages, and you'll always hear the latest and greatest on what's going on with our members like Lindsay. So thank you so much again, Lindsay, for spending
Thank you,
time with
guys.
me today. You have a wonderful rest of the day and good luck on your feature.
Thank you very much.